Normally, when a teenager goes missing, it's all over the news. And at the very least, you kind of hope that law enforcement would go all out and try and find her. But this hugely unfair and disturbing case highlights a real problem in a state where lots and lots of women are going missing. And the local police, they just don't seem to care at all. Let's dive in. Kaysera Stops Pretty Places was a Native American teenager with a lot going for her. She was part of the Crow and Northern Cheyenne tribal community, and she grew up on a reservation based in Hardin County in southeast Montana, USA. The Indian reservation system established tracts of land called reservations for Native Americans to live on as white settlers took over their land. Kaysera had a teenage little brother and a much younger sister, who she always included in her plans for the future. She was especially close to her grandmother, Yolanda Fraser, who raised her, and she would also frequently rescue any stray animals in the area. Honestly, it sounds like she was a pretty lovely person. In late August 2019, Kaysera was about to graduate from high school. She was a star athlete, but also sang in the choir, acted in school plays, and basically had a super bright future ahead of her. She was learning to be a professional actress and a performer, and hoped to study performing in nearby Missoula. Now, she also had her share of wild moments as she turned 18, but she definitely wasn't the type to just leave out of the blue. Then on August 26, 2019, she went out for the evening, and for all that evening, she didn't answer her phone or contact anybody. At first, her grandma wasn't too worried, but that changed really quickly when she heard nothing by the next morning. Yolanda immediately called all of Kaysera's friends and asked everyone who might know if they'd seen her, but nobody had any idea where she might be. Now super concerned about her granddaughter, on August 26, Yolanda naturally went to the Big Horn County Sheriff's Office to raise the alarm. Now, you'd think that a missing teenager would get some reaction from the cops, right? But the Sheriff's Department didn't exactly leap into action and try to find Kaysera. They never raised a missing and endangered person advisory or sent any media alerts about her disappearance. In fact, when asked about her just a year later, they'd even struggled to find her missing person poster. So instead, Kaysera's family searched all over for her. Then, a few days later, on August 29th, a jogger found a body lying face down, wrapped in plastic, right by the driveway of a house, near to a very busy junction. The police arrived at the scene but failed to secure it very well. Usually, in any really suspicious case like this, the investigators would keep it totally pristine so that they could gather evidence. But this time, they just didn't. Word got out about a body being found in the area where Kaysera had disappeared. But even though Kaysera's family were extremely sure that it was her, the investigators insisted that it wasn't. They wouldn't even let them identify who it was. So the family kept on searching and hoping to find her for another 2 weeks. But eventually, they found out that the plastic-wrapped body was poor Kaysera. Even worse, her remains were now being held out of her home county. I guess because they discovered her about 10 minutes outside the boundary. Imagine not knowing for 2 weeks when, for no good reason, this wasn't told for you by the very people who should have been helping you. Of course, her family were horrified at the awful news. Her uncle said,
"Yeah, she was very special, and it just, I don't know, it's just like it's like a sucker punch. I don't know. It's just, she was so special, and it devastated us."
Even then, there were a whole lot more complications, and the coroner insisted that her remains were cremated before Kaysera's family could bring her home. Her family very reluctantly agreed to this, just so that they could have her back. But there would be at least an autopsy to check how she passed away, right? Well, yes. It took over 3 weeks to get the result from it, though. The coroner assured them that it would show the cause of death as exposure. But when it finally arrived, no cause was confirmed at all. Apparently, there was no evidence of injury or natural disease, and her blood alcohol level was 0.149. This meant it was undetermined. And once she was cremated, it was far too late to get a second opinion. But I mean, young women, especially fit and healthy athletes like Kaysera, don't tend to die for no reason. Oh, and the wrapped in plastic bit? Anyone who cared would consider that insanely sus. But then everything about this case is sus. And there are enough red flags every step of the way here to line the carpet at the Oscars. I mean, for a start, Terry Bulis, who did the autopsy, had already been disciplined in 2003 for ethics violations by lining his own pockets. He owns both the Bulis Mortuary and was also elected the BHC County Coroner, which causes a major conflict of interest because his job as coroner and his, autopsy duties. Usually the same person doesn't hold these roles, but there, I guess he gets a pass. It's all super weird, and the police were really dragging their feet on investigating Kaysera's case. Her aunt, Grace Butale, says, "We have been ignored. We have written letters, requested meetings, made phone calls, provided witness statements. We have done all that we possibly can imagine to convince law enforcement to investigate of my niece." The creepiest detail of all, Kaysera had already been kidnapped once that year. She was meant to be going to a big 4th of July, Northern Cheyenne powwow event. Only instead of an event, an ex-parole took her to one of the worst places she could ever end up. This area of Missoula was a crossroads full of drug dealers and other extremely sketchy people. A lot of other people vanished without trace or were even sold or trafficked around there. Now, incredibly, Kaysera managed to get away from that situation. The details of exactly how are kinda hazy, but who knows what she saw there or what else she learned while she was trying to get out. The theory around her case goes that this might be exactly why something so terrible happened to her in August. But the case gets even more suspicious. One of the first official investigators on the scene was a cop who had, get this, beaten up Kaysera's little brother while they were at the annual Crow Fair in mid-August. When this happened, he was temporarily in a wheelchair, and Kaysera had sensibly filmed the attack on her phone. Of course, she uploaded it. Now, this had happened in mid-August, just a week or two before she went missing. The same cop eventually had to rescue, that is, leave the case, because of this conflict of interest. But he did some damage before he left. While this guy was in charge of the crime scene, remember that busy driveway where her body was found? Well, he was the one who let it get all hopelessly contaminated by people wandering in and out. There are red flags, and then this is a whole code red alert. Now, we obviously can't prove any of that neglect was deliberate, though everything about the official investigation does seem totally strange. And even worse, Kaysera's case really isn't the first or last one where no one took action, despite its suspicious circumstances. There does seem to be a very scary pattern of similar cases. It turns out that lots of other women and kids from the reservation have vanished, just like Kaysera, only to be found, sometimes anyway, a little while later, deceased. And it's usually under very strange circumstances, which the police just aren't interested in investigating. The reservation is on Interstate 90. To give you an idea of how huge this issue is, the area is often known as the Second Highway of Tears. This is because although Native Americans make up just 6.6% of the population in Montana, they're 4 times more likely to go missing than any other groups in that state. Their homicides are also 10 times the national average. That's really scary. And that's even before the higher rates of unsafe environment for women at home in the general area. Let's just say things are often dangerous there. And a very complicated combination of tribal agencies and authorities working at odds in the county doesn't make this any easier. Despite this, the autopsy reports on these cases almost always blame exposure. That is, the cause is usually put down to hypothermia, which, yes, can definitely happen even in summer, but one local woman was discovered at a rest stop at a location that had already been searched. She appeared to be just a few meters from where she'd gone missing. So no, that's not suspicious at all. And the way that poor Kaysera was found, wrapped in plastic, face down, absolutely screams that a sketchy situation caused it. Remember that she was a fit, very healthy high school student. The police insisted she'd been lying there for 5 days, which seems super unlikely as she was found on a pretty busy street. It honestly looks like she was just placed there just a little while before she was discovered by that random jogger. But come on, why on earth isn't this problem being taken more seriously? The families of these missing women and men often have to do the police work themselves, which is totally crazy, right? But it's an ongoing nightmare for the families that live there. There's even a name for it: Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, MMIW. Now, the local Indigenous community has been working super hard to bring attention to it. There have been many marches, campaigns, and protests in Hardin to raise awareness. For a start, in 2019, Kaysera was in the 27th MMID recorded.
That's one of the highest numbers of any county in Montana, and any county in the country. And we're continuing to face red tape.
Above all, they want this problem to be taken a lot more seriously. They've raised a GoFundMe for Kaysera, and there's now a reward of $20,000 for more information. Information really seems to be the important factor here. There just isn't enough of it yet to solve what's going on.
Family members, and we need to find out what happened to them.
Now, on August 16th, 2021, Bighorn County Attorney Jay Harris issued a public report to assure the community the death of 18-year-old Kaysera Stops at Pretty Places is not forgotten and is still under investigation. But her aunt, Grace Butale, still thinks he's just victim blaming instead of fixing the issues. He has always taken the position that Kaysera was troubled, that she did this to herself. At least a task force to handle the situation has now been created, which is a good start. But the way Kaysera's case and so many others has been handled up until now means that it's hard to have much confidence in the system. But who knows? Hopefully in the future, that will all start to change. For now, there's still a huge load of questions about this to be answered. What do you think about this case? Is there a conspiracy around Kaysera and the other missing men and women? And will the family ever know what really happened to her? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below.